When we started, we were the only people saying it is worth putting in your money into the para athlete space. And they're like, no, so sad. We'll give them a wheelchair. Like, this is not sad. Be the change you wish to see in the world. It is the best possible time to be Indian, to be in India. Seeing your flag fly in a foreign country gives you a kind of pride that you can't feel.
Oh my god, I have goosebumps all over.
You just can't feel when you hear it.
You just feel it.
I could continue making rich people richer, or or I could aim to put India on a world sporting map. When corporate India believed that sport is part of nation building, I think that was the turning point. So we've been part of 33 athletes who won Arjuna Awards, also 10 Khel Ratna Awards. And we also had a Rahul Dravid athlete mentorship program. And then we also created something called as a Women in Sport Karke Dikhaungi program.
The Para Champions program, you shifted the conversation from sympathy to performance.
2016, there were only 19 athletes that went from India. You want to guess how many athletes were there from China? It's been challenging and super exciting to work with Gen Z.
The most overrated life lessons?
Do your best, work really hard, and they will see. Absolutely overrated. Nobody sees. And that is how cruel and brutal sport is. We don't know. You might give it 20 years of your life and you may never make it to the Olympics. We all agree India has talent. We need to put a pathway. We need to put a system. We need to show what is possible beyond the medal.
Get ready for an episode that proves that the boardroom isn't the only arena for a champion. On this week's The CEO Effect, we sit down with Deepti Bopaya, a woman who swapped the predictable path of a successful banker for an exhilarating, often chaotic world of sports administration. Deepti isn't just about good intentions, she's about game changing impact. A former state level tennis player for Karnataka, Deepti brought the discipline of an athlete and the razor sharp focus of a vice president at HSBC Retail Banking to the nonprofit sector. For over a decade, she served as the CEO of the Go Sports Foundation and fundamentally shifting the narrative around sports in India from a niche pursuit to a nation building movement. She's been the driving force behind supporting athletes who have collectively won 33 Arjuna Awards and 10 Khel Ratna Awards, championing both able bodied and para athletes. She is now elevated to the governing board of the Go Sports Foundation. Join us to hear from the woman who believes excellence is always worth pursuing and learn how she built an empire of support for India's sporting future, proving that true leadership is often found outside the traditional gold standard. Welcome to the CEO Effect, Devdi. Wonderful to have you here.
So glad to be here. Very, very, very excited about our conversation.
It was a lovely conversation, right? So true, so authentic, so heartfelt. It was
Yeah, it felt like we knew each other.
exactly. And it also made me put together some interesting questions for us to explore today.
Yeah,
Yeah.
looking forward to all your questions.
Deepti, as a successful former athlete and the youngest vice president of HSBC retail banking space, what made you take that leap of faith to shift from a secure space to a uncertain space of sports administration?
You're very kind to say successful athlete. I say unsuccessful because I couldn't go beyond the state level, right? Playing sport allows you to take risks from a very, very early age. I think it comes naturally to sports people to take some risks. Obviously, it's at the cost of settling down in the true sense of what settling down is. But I remember my parents sitting me down, at one stage when I was playing tennis and basketball, and they're like, this is great, but at some point you need to be independent, financially independent, and study and do something. So you have to focus on that as well. That was a very natural cycle of sport led to admissions. I had a sports quota. I was in Mount Carmel, and then I did my MBA from Symbiosis Pune and had my campus placements. And two of my internships were actually very interesting. Again, risk taking, right? I think it comes from an early age. So I actually just wrote an email. I'd got to know Disney Channel opened office and open shop in India. And I was like, so cool, Disneyland, Disney Channel.
Hmm.
How cool it'll be working there and doing an internship. So I actually wrote to them. Someone gave me that time there was no LinkedIn. There was a platform called Rise. I'm sure you will know that.
Yeah.
Right? And that was one of the first things they made us do in B school. Our professor there, made us start that. I just wrote to them with an email ID. I still remember my boss Aditi over there, and I happened to become the first intern there. And when I went, she's like, we don't have internships. We're just like very new. There's no concept of it. And that time, I didn't even have my own laptop. I had to wait, go back to college. The next day, I was like, they wouldn't have responded, but I looked at my email. Oh, there was an email. So I think that risk taking has always been there. And with HSBC, I think my defining moment was I loved what I did
Hmm.
from day one. Fantastic bosses, colleagues. I learned a lot. Every single day, I like to be in places where I can learn.
Hmm.
So that excited me. And I met some fabulous people. I was in Chennai initially. And, you're managing people with a certain net worth. And with that comes interests and culture and art and fascinating stuff that people were doing. So I never looked at myself as I'm a banker managing money, but I looked at myself as, and we were called relationship managers.
Yeah.
So I loved that. So you were attending functions, and it was like old days banking, right? Your branch manager actually attended everything of the family.
So true.
So I kind of liked that. And I even today have some great clients who are now friends and family, but I enjoyed that part of it. But at some point, I was like, is this really what I want to do my whole life? And every 18 months, you can move in the bank. And every 18 months, I had a new role. So I moved from sales into learning and development. And then my next set of bosses were actually there in my session and said, what are you doing in learning and development? Come back into the business side and meet people. So then that's when I moved back to Bangalore and again came back into wealth. I think there was this one evening during 2012, the Olympics was on. And, we had this great evening after the end of the month, you have a celebration and you're either celebrating or you're very upset you've not met your targets. But we were all in a bar sitting, drinking, and the Olympics was on. And a bunch of my colleagues were like, just change the channel. No, there's some football match coming. I was like, the Olympics is on. India is taking part. What do you mean by change the channel?
Hmm.
And something just triggered me that day. And I was like, how can we as Indians want to not see a fellow Indian? First of all, hardly 100 of us make it to the Olympics. We're the largest population in the world and we send 100, 120, 150 athletes. So that's when I got back, and I think the sportsman in me continued to have the interest in sport. I was like, why are we not doing well in sport? We are the greatest doctors, scientists. We are sending people, going to the moon. We're doing everything as first, but how come this is not possible? So for me, that was my defining moment, and also from a purpose standpoint, right? Because I could continue making rich people richer, or or I could aim to put India on a world sporting map. So I kind of took that route.
So that takes me to the next question. I'm curious. What was your secret weapon in scaling Go Sports?
It's a combination of the right people coming together for the right reasons, not being driven by the self, but really the cause. Our trustees who started the foundation, all extremely accomplished individuals who were great at sport, great at education, and then decided to set something because they care about the situation. It was great that I found the trustees and I saw their vision. Nandan is our managing trustee, and was a former Rhodes Scholar, and just his vision of saying why this is important and what is the role of sport in our society. I think that conversation with him kind of changed my life on why this is worth pursuing. Why is it worth walking away from a high paying job, and at a very young age you are earning significantly well, and what is this purpose, passion at that point of time, right? You don't even I didn't understand that word, those words then. Today I have a larger sense of what purpose and passion means. But at that time, it was just not wanting to spend my time doing things that is not going to impact the world. First, always I say is who are you joining? Who are you working with? What's the team like? What's the vision? Are you all aligned on your values? And I think that came very, very early on. But I think the turning point was the CSR that happened. Before that, it was through friends and family. We lost a lot of friends and family in our early days because every time they would meet us, we'd be like, this one athlete needs to go here, needs a flight ticket, needs something. Uh, and they were great. We would not be here without every single person who supported us in our early days, and very grateful for that. But I think CSR, when corporate India believed that sport is part of nation building, I think that was the turning point. And for us, from there, conversations became easier because you're not explaining why sport is important. You're saying, how can we create a program or project for you which allows you to be part of nation building? So I think that is really how this trajectory happened. And every single leader who's joined to support the foundation, we keep saying we're changing the script of Indian sport. We were not promising medals. We still don't promise medals. We're not saying you give us the money and India would be having hundreds of medals if we could pay and get our medals, right?
Yeah.
But we don't have that. So our whole attempt is the pursuit of excellence. We genuinely feel it is worth giving it your all to become the best version of yourself. And what better way than sport? And what better way to see young 12, 13, 14-year-olds wake up 4 a.m., put in that discipline, that hard work, and do something which they don't even know if they are going to reach or not. And that is how cruel and brutal sport is. We don't know. You might give it 20 years of your life and you may never make it to the Olympics. Just what you have gone through. I mean, our level is a state level and we still go back to everything because of sport. So people who've played sport, I think, are slightly different. There's a lot of data. I was telling you
Yeah.
recently that close to 65% of women in the Fortune 500 C-suite companies are women who played sport in growing up years. That just shows, the combination. So I think this journey from a financial standpoint is great to put a number, but I think the number of lives we've been able to touch, the number of athletes who've come from such humble backgrounds but have broken the poverty cycle because of sport, the number of women who are now confident young uh, girls chasing their dream and inspiring everyone in their community to go and be whatever they want to be. Someone who's a person with disability saying, hey, I have an identity today. So I think money is just showing scale, but really the opportunity to build this as an idea that excellence is worth pursuing. I think that was my exciting part. And all our founders, our board members, we've all also very fortunate to have Rahul Dravid, Pullela Gopichand. Abhinav Bindra was our board member for the initial few years till he set up his own foundation. And all they spoke about is we all agree India has talent. We need to put a pathway. We need to put a system. We need to show what is possible beyond the medal. Yeah. And that's 17 years later, we're here.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. What I'm hearing is not just pursuit of excellence, it's about having that purpose, vision, also finding your right path. I also liked the way you connected the CSR to the purpose rather than, you have a CSR, let's use it. Whereas you're talking about how that CSR can create a project and a partnership to help elevate India and its athletes.
Given that there is a possibility today, some of our conversations with, and these are some of the largest corporates in the country that we've had a chance to get support, whether it's the Aditya Birla Group or Innocent Bank or Infosys Foundation. I remember my initial conversation with Mrs. Murthy as well. Sudha ma'am, she was just like, if it's for girls and sport, I didn't get a chance. We must support them. Just
Yeah.
saying, no one's even asking, is it medal, how many medals you'll get? And Yes, the medal is very valuable. No taking that away. I mean, to win that 6 grams of gold is exceptional. Very few athletes in the world can actually do it. But it cannot become the only thing that I chase. And culturally, also, and you in your experience will know this very well, right? We love the first place,
Yes,
first rank,
competitive first place.
competitive. Like, second is okay, but first is very important, right? The journey doesn't matter at all. So I think just changing that culturally for the youngsters is important because I mean, I don't even like the extreme of it where everyone gets a medal.
Yeah.
I'm not cool with that also. I mean, we need to find a balance, right? Today's school sometimes is all of you have participated, so we'll give you a medal. I'm like,
Yeah.
then you'll never know
Mm.
what the pinnacle is. So, how do you find that fine balance? So, I think sport teaches you that because there can only be one winner, right?
Mm.
And the rest of you are attempting to become a winner. You're not a loser. I mean, at least that's my way of looking at sport.
Absolutely. Is it still true that sports is not seen as a career and it is used for sports quotas and come with an idea and a passion to pursue sports as their career?
Today, I would say yes, people are coming forward as a saying, I want to have a career in sport. But even probably 10 years ago, that was not the case. There was nothing called as sports administrators. I mean, you had the Sports Authority of India and had some incredible leaders who actually shaped a lot of things for the country. Privately, there were no jobs in sport per se. But thanks to foundations, thanks to leagues, thanks to the business of sport, we now have a lot of opportunity. And India, has just put in its bid wanting to host the 2036 Olympics. It's a very, very, very big deal. And we also, won the Commonwealth Games bid. And for a country to host these games, you need people. You need people to make all of this happen. Infrastructure is important. We have a long way to go there. But also you need people to make it happen. So today there is a huge opportunity. The business of sport is becoming an industry. Eventually, it's not yet a full-fledged industry. We have some time to go. But in the next decade, I think if you're talking, you'll be very happy and surprised to see those numbers
shift
and the
that is going.
revenues and the opportunities more than anything else.
That's great news. We have a lot of opportunities opening up.
Yeah,
Oh,
lots for youngsters, for people who've been in corporate like myself to come back into sports, doctors, engineers. Doesn't matter what you've done.
Yeah.
Sport has an opportunity, so reach out to us.
That's it. That's nice. I know the numbers, but I would love to hear you state the medals that and the success stories of Go Sport Foundation.
We love taking up the difficult parts of Indian sport where someone says, this is not possible. We like to chase that collectively as a team. So we've been part of 33 athletes who won Arjuna Awards, and you get it when you have a significant achievement. Also, 10 Khel Ratna Awards. Khel Ratna is the highest sporting honor given. It's interesting because so far, till in this cycle so far, we've not actually had an athlete who's won an Olympic medal. But we've had athletes who won a Khel Ratna award, which means their achievement was so big and so large and so historic, it deserved the Khel Ratna award, right? And that's what we're trying to showcase and tell people. Excellence does not have to be linked to the Olympic medal. It can be historic. It can be the first time. It can be so Deepa Karmakar, the gymnast, that was one of hers. Chirag Satvik, the badminton boys, went on to become world number one for a continuous set of weeks, which no other Indian has been able to do. We've had shooters and archers and divers and taekwondo athletes. And where we're really focusing on is even the way we shape our policies sometimes. We go back to traditionally, we've been good in archery, shooting. So we will continue to be good in it. But I think the current generation is not taking up archery or shooting that much, as much.
Okay.
I mean, though the number of athletes who played the sport has gone up, but it's not only that. Today there are new sports. There's like sport climbing is a sport, taekwondo, fencing. In fact, a girl from Chennai, Bhavani Devi, was India's first athlete who qualified for the Olympics in fencing. And I still remember when we picked up a fencer, everyone was like, what is fencing, first of all? Right? Because it's not at all common. She's this girl from Chennai who took up fencing because it was in her school, and from there went on to become an Olympic champion. And today you have close to 1,000, 2,000 athletes who are participating at the nationals to become a fencer. So the ecosystem gets built
Yeah.
because you create a role model. And for us, really, that's excellence. Role models, pathways, being the best version of yourself.
Yeah. And it's very inspiring.
I'm in no shortage of inspiration or complaints,
Yeah.
because seeing these athletes day in, day out, you just sit back and you're like, okay, I just cannot complain. I have everything. I'm abundant. I'm content. Right?
Deeply, what is the uniqueness that you bring to the table as a woman leader?
Ouch. When you say woman leader.
Can leadership be gender? No, gender free.
I mean, I know this is the CEO effect, but I think you're just a leader, irrespective of the gender. What you bring into your leadership in terms of strengths and skills will be highly influenced by your gender. I know that and I feel that.
Yeah.
But when we say leader and woman leader, it's never male leader, and you know. So I think I like leader. But yes, I think men and women are both complex in our own ways, and we come with our own strengths uh, and weaknesses and blind spots, which I have also learned over a period of time. So there are times where my colleagues who are male have brought in a very different element, which probably I've not observed or noticed. And many times I have brought in perspectives which is more empathetic or more assertive in our own way, which show your gender. But ultimately, irrespective of your gender, you have to run the business, you have to grow the business, and you have to manage people. I mean, that's the possible bottom line for any organization, right? You have an idea, you have to scale it, you have a team, you have to lead the team, you have to know what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, and what are you doing, what are you trying to build. So why we do what we do, and where do we want to get to. And I think that's the role of large part of a leader's role, to set the vision, to set the goalpost, and then take everyone along. And I think in my sport journey as well, I have captained my teams at different places. So you've done it at that stage. So you try and use those similar skill sets. A lot of sports analogy in my life, but I genuinely feel what has worked for me is being consistent, being disciplined, showing up, irrespective of what the outcomes are. Your early years, they probably don't take you seriously.
Do you think it comes because women naturally like to hold things together?
Yes, and sometimes it can not be appreciated also.
It could backfire.
It can, and I don't
Yeah.
think that model works in every situation.
Yes.
There are some times where you have to just let go and, you know, let people have their own experiences. I think there is a protective side where you don't want someone to fail. We've all learned through failing. We've all learned through making our mistakes. So don't make it so easy that they don't have any learnings. But one of the things, and my team, I keep telling them, that is, make new mistakes. Let's not make anyone who's made a mistake, let's not repeat that mistake. Let's make new mistakes, right? We don't need to. If I did something stupid and it didn't work, and it's there for all of us to see, let's not go and do the same thing. And how do we keep moving forward but making new mistakes? And I think that has been special, because then you really push boundaries, you really challenge yourself, and As a leader, I think it's a combination of working across stakeholders. And in our organization, you have athletes, you have athlete parents, you have coaches, you have federations, administrators, donors, CEOs of those companies, CSR personnel, plus you have the ministry, the government, everybody else. It's a lot of stakeholders. So there's no one style fits all.
Hmm.
So it's very important to bring your authentic self every single day.
Beautiful. And what are the hard challenges you had to overcome to be where you are right now?
Like, I mean, in
I'm
terms
not
of,
talking about your strategic
yeah,
challenges. You, as a person, to evolve, what were those barriers that you had to break through?
one is I don't have all the answers. I don't need to have all the answers. I need to find the people smarter than what I think I am.
Hmm.
And I need a team that is going to really have the ability to say, "Deepti, this sucks. This doesn't work for me." And having that opportunity to have these open, honest conversations, I think that's critical. The space that we're in the impact sector, we're in the non-profit space, right? We're not out here to make money. We're here for a cause. So building trust, I think, is the most important piece of self-development that I've had over the years. Initially when you come in, it's different how you build trust. I think as you grow and as you build these relationships, the way trust gets formed is also different.
Hmm.
Today, you have a legacy of years of work at the back of you to show that you've done it.
Yeah.
You have experience. But when you're new, it's just you and that individual and, our board or our trustees, just 4, 5 of us saying, hey, you know what? We know what we're doing. We want to do this and we want you to back us.
Hmm.
And I think that time, it's really true for any entrepreneur or any startup
That's
founder, right? Where you are trying to make a mark for your idea or you're selling yourself. I believe building trust is actually selling yourself.
hmm.
The other one would be rejections.
Mhm.
You don't take rejections personally. It's to the idea or it's to at that timing where someone does not want to join you or come on board.
I want to pick on a statement you made that women have to consistently show up and be there. What is the cost? What is the price we are paying for that?
I feel we bring our full selves to everything.
Hmm.
And sometimes when you bring your full self continuously every single time in every single activity that you do, it can take a toll on you
Hmm.
physically, mentally, emotionally, because you're not just doing this, you have many other things to take care of. I've been very fortunate that way to have people who, I mean, I don't have kids and, I don't have to, my parents are self sufficient and, nobody's dependent. But I see a lot of women around me and over the years where they work really hard and they're incredible, but then they again have to go home, show up again fully with
Yeah.
kids, show up again, finish their work, come back. Like there's just no break. Also, figuring out at the cost of what? Because otherwise, culturally, we've been told this is how it is.
Hmm.
You're getting a chance to work and live your dreams, but rest and recovery is required for any gender.
Yeah.
Right?
And are we easy with people who take that rest and recovery?
No. I think that's why it's so difficult sometimes for women who've taken a break to come back.
Hmm.
And when I say break, it doesn't mean a maternity break or a marriage break, or it could just be time off.
Hmm.
I just need time off. Yeah, I don't think it's very easy. It's more like, oh, you've kind of stepped back, is it? Oh,
Hmm.
you're not able to manage. Oh, it's too much. It's too overwhelming. I feel conversations today are slightly better because people are understanding mental health better.
Hmm.
They're understanding depression better. They're understanding the different, kind of things that could actually go on for a person. And I'm glad those conversations are happening openly. But I think it can be better. We can be a little bit more open, supportive. And I think as a leader, it's important to know what's happening with your team. I think because I have been able to build those relationships, I've been able to, in whatever way possible, ensure that they're given that space. But then when they do it, they'll give you your 100%, right? It's a combination and it's a learning, it's a journey. I don't think I knew all this when I joined. It's
Mm.
because I've met people who've challenged me, people who've called it out.
How was it with your women or female athletes for them to take a break, or how was the comeback?
It's now becoming more popular
Mm.
to come back. Otherwise, after a certain age, you're a retired athlete. You don't come back after marriage and you don't come back after thing. But I think Mary Com
Yeah.
was a great example of showing, boss, I can have 3 kids and come back
Yeah.
and still win. You have a lot of other athletes now are coming back even after marriage. Before it used to be like, oh, they're getting married, their career's over. But now you have Sindhu and you have enough athletes who are married and they're doing great, and it's part of your life, right? It's so I think there were these certain careers where if you are doing this, then you can't really have a personal life, and that's changing a lot. And I think that's changing because even international athletes are showing the possibility of, "Yeah, I have a partner, I have a you know spouse, I have children, and I'm going to come back and I'm still going to go and win. My relationships don't define what I bring to work."
So seeing it getting better?
Much better. Much better. And you're not, even brands are continuing their endorsements to a large extent, even after. In fact, Nike and some of the other brands actually had it back in their contracts saying that in case of a maternity break, we won't drop you from the.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have a long way to go, but at least
Yeah.
these conversations are happening. I think if conversations don't happen,
Yeah.
then it's scary because then you have no idea what's happening.
So true. The Para Champions program, it has been a great strategic move, right? You shifted the conversation from sympathy to performance, and you were a pioneer in that. What were the myths you had to break culturally, financially, to get that funded? And
So when we started the foundation actually in 2008, we started supporting able-bodied athletes and athletes with disability. So it was not a new thing to support a para athlete. But as we started working with athletes, we realized that para athletes require a little bit more understanding, more structure. I mean, just to give you an example, if I'm a young badminton player, I need to play 12 to 15 tournaments a year to keep
Mhm.
my ranking and keep going. And if you're playing in the Asian countries, you need at least 50,000 to 75,000 to a lakh of rupees to go, travel, come back. That's me. Plus, if I'm a minor, I go with my parent.
Mm.
Now, if I'm a person with disability, and if I am on a wheelchair, and if I have waist down disability, then I need, and depending on how tall I am, I might need 2 people to travel with me. So that same 75,000 will go up to about 2 lakhs for one competition.
Ah.
So that's when we realized that you can't treat athletes who are trying to get to the Paralympics, and Paralympics is the parallel of the Olympics.
Yeah.
It happens 3 weeks after the Olympics at the same place, at the same venue,
Mm.
just after, making sure the accessibility is taken care of. So I've had the good fortune of actually going to Tokyo, to Rio first for the Rio Olympics in 2016. When we started in 2014, we kind of conceptualized a program called the Para Champions Program,
Mm.
because CSR also tells you that you need to fund a project or a program. It can't be a one time support.
Okay.
I can't just write a check and say it's CSR. It has to be towards something that has a start and an end and a
Mm.
outcome and an impact. So I think that's when I'm very proud that we kind of conceptualized this program. And we also had a Rahul Dravid athlete mentorship program. And then we also created something called as a Women in Sport Karke Dikhaungi program. When we would sit in front of the corporate person, they would say, "Oh, no, our mandate is women." Like, okay, no problem. We'll curate a program for you for women.
Mm.
You tell us what age, what sport, and all of that, and we'll curate something for you. So I think we have built our strength in understanding what corporate India wants
Mm.
and building it based on the needs of the athletes and the sports people, and then curating it as a program. So the Para Champions program started with 15 athletes. Today they support 45 athletes. But just to tell you how the Paralympic movement has grown, 2016, there were only 19 athletes that went from India. Do you want to guess how many athletes were there from China in 2016? Any guess? They are much better than us in terms of performance in para from a long time.
200?
350.
Wow.
We were 19.
And where are we now?
Yeah. So today, uh, at to Paris Olympics, which just got over last year, we had 84 athletes who went,
Beautiful.
and we came back with 29 medals.
That is incredible.
And I think that for us at the foundation is one of our biggest successes, because when we started, we were the only people saying it is worth putting in your money into the para athlete space. And they're like, no, no, so sad. We'll give them a wheelchair. Like, this is not sad. They're competing with the top 100 countries in the world. It is high performance. It is not sympathy. And I think changing that narrative, and today you have, they're getting jobs, they're getting the Arjuna Awards, they're getting the Khel Ratnas, they're getting equal recognition, is absolutely fabulous for us to see. And the start was just 15 athletes, who believed that we could be part of their journey. And I always say a big thank you to athletes, coaches, and parents, because if they don't decide to have us in their team, or allow us to be part of their team, then money is something you can get from anywhere, I feel. But actually believing that we can be part of this journey together, I think that is more special. And we always say we're your entourage.
That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And that's so proud.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's incredible. You work with a large team of the younger generation from the conversation I gathered. And they have a very different concept towards work life balance, teamwork. Are you breaking your own bias and myths by working with them?
Good question. I'm sure this is actually the conversation everywhere, right? Gen Zs. But I must say it's been challenging and super exciting to work with Gen Zs, because if they know what they're doing and they have the clarity, then sky is the limit.
Hmm.
But if you just get them to work like how we worked in our early days, and even if you say things like, in our time we did this, sound like my dad sometimes. He used to say, we used to walk so many kilometers and we didn't have this fancy shoe. I was like, yeah, but that's not the time you live in.
Absolutely.
So if we don't like somebody from another generation telling us that, I don't think it's fair and right for us to tell this generation that. But yes, the sense of purpose is very high
Hmm.
at a very young age,
Hmm.
which is why it seems odd for us to identify with it, because majority of our lives have been about survival, about
Beautifully said.
winning, getting to the top, becoming number one, becoming the CEO. It is all about the top. But today, sometimes, I mean, very recently, a colleague and I actually sat in one of the conversations, and we were talking about a promotion. It was very gracefully declined.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because they want to work on themselves and do a lot more things and not take up the responsibility which might take away from their own self growth.
Hmm.
I thought that was, initially you're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
uh, we would never say no to
Yeah,
a
a
promotion,
promotion.
right? It's more money, more opportunity, more. So I don't think they chase titles. I don't think they chase the recognition of society much.
Hmm.
I like that they're purpose driven, but I would also like that that purpose is very clearly brought out initially, so that you can discuss what works for an organization.
From what I hear, I think you're also giving a very great message to the organizations that have that conversation, understand the purpose that is driving the Gen Z, have that conversation and map it to their growth, map it to your strategy.
Yeah.
That's a great piece of advice to.
Yeah. And also, a friend of mine very recently told me, how old do you think the Gen Z is? And I was like, maybe early 20s. And they like, no, do the math. And then I was like, oh no, it's like
Yeah.
30,
Yeah, they are in their 30s.
which means they're going to be leading organizations, which means they are the future leaders, and which means not even future, they are the current leaders.
correct.
Right. And it's your time now. So it was a it was a moment for me to actually, figure that out, because I think in our mind sometimes we think, oh, Gen Zs are still much younger, but you're also at Gen Alpha. We won't go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really,
Yeah, I'm sure you're seeing the Gen Alpha in your athletic space, right?
absolutely we
Yeah.
work with that. And it's amazing you said that, because having been now in sports administration, every 5 to 8 years I see how they train, how they live, how they react and respond differently.
Beautiful.
So a 13-year-old badminton player is very different from a 22-year-old or a 25-year-old in just how they think, how they train,
Mm.
even how they train. It's fascinating. And I've not looked at it from the Gen Z lens, but I think I'm going to do that, because I mean, I got something to kind of look at over here, because it is, you can't just tell them train 10 hours a day. That is old school and they don't believe in it. You tell me what needs to be done at what time and what will happen. The kind of questions they ask us today is fascinating. So I'm going to share this, because we actually do this athlete selection, and athletes apply for our scholarships. And once they apply for our scholarships, we do the shortlist, and then we bring them into an interaction round. And 10 years back in this interaction round, when we used to ask them, why do you play sport? The response used to be, mujhe Olympian banna hai.
Hmm.
5-8 years later, it became, mujhe Olympics mein jaake jeetna hai. Couple of months back, we spoke to a young table tennis player, this girl who from West Bengal, 13-year-old. Ma'am, I'm training for 2036. So if I get into LA 2028, that'll be my first exposure event. She's
Mhm.
sitting and having this conversation.
Wow.
2032, I'll try to finish in the top 5, and 2036, I'll win my medal. And I was like, okay. Our whole panel was like, okay, that's great. And we'd love to be part of your journey. Right? With that kind of clarity,
Yeah.
it's just so clear. So we've seen that change. And I think that's also because of how new India is.
Yes.
It is the best possible time to be Indian, to be in India. The confidence of seeing your flag fly in a foreign country and the national anthem play for your performance and for the country gives you a kind of pride that you can't feel.
Oh my God, I have goosebumps all over.
You just can't feel when you
just feel it.
Yeah, and I think that's really special, because today a young Indian athlete will go straight up and be proud to say they're Indian. And I think, yeah, it's new India and great time to be Indian.
Including me and everybody out there will be so proud of you for sharing that today.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, you're all set to go for the last rapid fire round?
Okay.
I want you to share the first thing that comes to your mind. Not think
Very
of the
tough,
answer.
the fighters. And I can't say anything in one word, but I will try.
Okay. The first thing you miss about being on the court.
Competition.
One skill from the bank you wish you could unlearn.
The long paperwork and process.
You still carry it.
I do it. I do it too much.
The best sport for learning to fail.
Any sport. Again, what you consider a sport
Hmm.
is also important. Video gaming for me right now it is a sport also. It's also at the Olympics. Esports. So you play video games. And you need to be mentally and physically very fit to play that over long hours.
Mm.
So yeah, I think any sport, anything that engages your mind to plan, create, organize, compete, is sport for me.
A word that should be banned from the conversation about women in leadership.
Women leader, just leader.
Just leader. I love it. A current athlete who epitomizes the GSF family spirit?
Too many to name.
Hmm.
Too many to name. I think it would be unfair for me to take one name, especially from a GSF family perspective. Too many. Sorry, I'll have to pass that one.
The one thing India needs more than medals right now?
Movement.
Movement.
Just physical movement.
Mm.
I think we have got so used to our phones and sitting. The medals are not going to come if we don't have any sort of physical activity. And also, we're probably the largest in terms of percentage of diabetic people in the country and
Mm.
the youngest population of youth in the world.
Start
Take
moving and taking it
action. So,
seriously.
yeah, movement.
That's beautiful. The most overrated life lessons?
Do your best, work really hard, and they will see. Absolutely overrated. Nobody sees.
Okay. That's a great food for
I
thought.
mean, my parents are going to kill me, but they've always said, you do what you have to do, and everything will come.
Yeah.
And somewhere along the way, you realize you need to ask, you need to show, you need to tell, you need to be difficult sometimes. And yeah, then you may get it.
Last question. Your personal definition of excellence.
Be the change you wish to see in the world.
Hmm. And I think you've embodied it too.
Thank you.
Right? Yeah.
Long way to go, but yeah, I've traveled a few steps.
Thank you, Deepti. Thank you for coming all the way from Mysore for this podcast. And this has been a masterclass on sports, especially for me. I'm not a sports person. How much ever I used to have the desire to play sports, my health right from childhood did not allow me to play. So I had very weak bones. I have around 7 fractures in my leg.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I was not allowed to play. And I was restrained from playing. I was more towards art. So for me, this is a masterclass on where India is standing in the sports front.
Thank
And
you.
I am absolutely thrilled, so proud of you, so proud of the work you're all doing. And I'm also super excited for the Olympics India is going to host.
Yeah, now you will follow.
Yeah, I will follow for sure. For sure. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed being here and wishing you the very best. And, you're shaping countless lives. So, more power to you.
Thank you. That is our sincere hope. Thank you.